Today, I did my share in building the nation. I drove a permanent secretary to an important urgent function. In fact, a luncheon at the Vic. The menu reflected its importance: cold bell beer with small talk, then fried chicken with niceties, wine to fill the hollowness of laughter, ice cream to cover the stereotype jokes. Coffee to keep the PS awake on return journey. I drove the permanent secretary back. He yawned many times at the back of the car. Then, to keep awake, he suddenly asked,
"Did you have any lunch, friend?"
I replied, looking straight ahead and secretly smiling at his belated concern.
I had none, but I'm slimming.
Upon which he said with a seriousness that amused more than annoyed me,
"Mwananchi, I too had none. I attended to matters of state. Highly delicate diplomatic duties, you know. And friend, it goes against my grain. Causes me stomach ulcers and wind. The pains we suffer in building the nation."
So the PS had ulcers too. My ulcers, I think, were equally painful. Only that they were caused by hunger, not sumptuous lunches. So two nation builders arrive home this evening with terrible stomach pains. The result of building a nation. Different ways.
Yes, my name is Samwiterson, and today I would like to discuss with you the poem called Building the Nation. Building the Nation was a poem that was written by Christopher Henry Mwanga. This is a Ugandan poet who wrote this poem, and the poem depicts actually the kind of lifestyle of African leaders who took power from the colonialists and ideally simply replaced the colonizer. In fact, when you read this poem, you will come to understand that the kind of independence that we got was only the change of color from white colonizers to black colonizers. Actually, the life of the common people did not change because the African leaders were caught up in the same evil lifestyle of their colonial predecessors. And so Christopher Henry Mwanga writes this poem out of his own observation of the kind of life the people who were saying to be building the nation were living immediately after independence, and who came to think that they are no longer building the nations, but they are building their own stomachs. And so here the poem goes. I will start with stanza 1. Today I did my share in building the nation. I drove the permanent secretary to an important urgent function, in fact to a luncheon at the Vic. In stanza 1, Christopher Henry Mwanga is trying to show the satire that is, or the irony that is in this poem, that he says that here we have the chauffeur or the driver who did his share. In fact, he's employed to drive the permanent secretary. So what he did was drive the permanent secretary to a place where there was feasting. In fact, he drove him to a place where there was lunch, But he says it was an important and urgent function. I want to believe this is what he was told by his boss, because he's just employed to drive the boss, and the boss says there is an important and urgent function. You have to rush me to the Vic. Okay, that is a hotel. It's not necessary that they were going to eat, but the fact is, if your boss says you have to drive me to an important and urgent function and it is taking place at the Vic, and the Vic is the name of a hotel in Kampala, so the driver did his share. In fact, he drove the man to a place, but when he reached there, he came to find that the most important and urgent function he was talking about was actually a luncheon. Stanza 2. The menu reflected its importance: cold bell beer with small talks, then fried chicken with nice teas, wine to fill the wholeness of the laughs, ice cream to cover the stereotype jokes, coffee to keep the peers awake on return journey. So this driver gives us an impression of what was called the important and urgent function. In fact, when you look at the menu, the way the guys were feasting, the menu looked really important. The man was with his friends, they were cracking jokes, chatting and eating, and they were drinking, imagine, cold bell beer. Then they ate fried chicken with some nice teas. I want to believe things like salads, maybe chili sauce, tomato sauce, and the other compliments that come with the main dish. But also they drank wine, they also took ice cream, they also drank coffee, and the coffee was specifically to keep the peers awake on return journey. But you'll be wondering what happened on the return journey. The poet says, I drove the permanent secretary back. He yawned many times in the back of the car. Then to keep awake, he suddenly asked, did you have a lunch, friend? I replied, looking straight ahead, and the secretary smiling at his belated concern that I had not but was slimming. Listen, here the person says he drove the permanent secretary back. But when he was driving, the permanent secretary was yawning, and he says many times in the back of the car. Most of the time, people who yawn are people who are hungry, people who have not eaten anything on an empty stomach. So they yawn because there is gas inside their stomach, and they are releasing it through yawning. But here we have the PS who is yawning, and the driver says the man had eaten a very sumptuous lunch. But listen, then to keep awake, he suddenly asked. It is very sad to note that the man does not ask whether the driver has eaten because he's concerned about his welfare, but it was just to keep himself awake throughout the journey. So he doesn't ask whether, my friend, you have eaten lunch or not, so that I may buy you one, or we may stop at a certain point where you can get your lunch. He was just to keep himself awake throughout the journey. Remember, he drank coffee to keep himself awake, but here he starts sleeping again, and to keep himself awake for the second time, he asked, did you have a lunch, friend? But then the poet says, the persona says, upon which he said with a seriousness that amused more than annoyed me, Mwananchi, I too had none. I attended to the matters of state, highly delicate diplomatic duties, and friend, it goes against my grain, causes me stomach ulcers and wind. He continued yawning again, the pains we suffer in building the nation. So the peers has ulcers too. My ulcers, I think, are equally painful, only they are caused by hunger, no sumptuous lunches. Here, in this stanza, the persona shows that he's very aware of the hypocrisy and the lies of the PS, because the PS says he had no lunch, he did not have any lunch, while the persona saw him having a very sumptuous lunch. And so here, he introduces us to the fact that the persona is aware of the hypocrisy of the peers, because the peers had a lunch, but here he says, I had no lunch. So the persona says, so the peers has ulcers too, he's wondering. And here we come to learn something, that everybody suffers according to his own action. The peers has ulcers too. My ulcers, I think, are equally painful. Only they are caused by hunger, no sumptuous lunches. So here we come to learn things, that the PS becomes sick because of eating too much. But the persona or the chauffeur, the driver, becomes sick because of not eating. So everybody shows that he has a point of vulnerability. Both the leaders, the bourgeoisie class, and the proletariat class all suffer because of their actions. But he says, my ulcers are caused by hunger and not some challenges. So he believes because of the mixture of the food, the kind of the food stuffs, the PS8, imagine the same stomach called belly beers and the niceties, fried chicken, wine, but also coffee, ice cream, the same stomach, you must suffer from ulcers. Finally, the last stanza is like a call to the masses to rise to the occasion and revenge, because he says, so two nation builders arrived home this evening with terrible stomach pains, the result of building the nation different ways. So he showed that although these people are claiming to be building the nation, but the kind of nation building I see is different. Not like the poor people. Those of us who are in the lower class, we are building the nation for sure, because we, like the driver, he was employed to drive the PS, so he did his share for sure, but the PS didn't do his share because all he did was to go and have the feast with his friends, and they need, during the working hours, imagine from lunchtime, and in the evening they came back. So if we want to do well with the nation building, I want to believe this is the message that Christopher Henry Mwanga Balo is trying to communicate. We must respect everything that belongs to the state. If it is the working hours, we have to respect the working hours. We have to respect the properties. You cannot use the government car and drive to the Vic, the hotel where you're going just to feast for the whole day and you go back home. We must respect also the funds that we are given. You cannot be misquandering the government fund to go and eat, you know, the luxury and the sumptuous lunches at different luxury hotels. That is the digestion of the poem. Then I will come back to digest the poem and take you through the themes and the messages we can get from this poem. Don't go away, stay tuned. I'll be